after the prologue, we are kind of introduced to these characters. We are introduced to Rani, we are introduced to Aparna. And so far in Act 1, we have seen that obviously, first and foremost, we're talking about a time where it's a very normal process that for a girl to meet her husband for the first time on the day of her marriage, for the girl's parents to choose a groom for their daughter. This is just how it used to be. Yes, love stories have existed forever, but I hope all of you are able to understand what kind of time we are talking about in the story. So, based on that timeline, this was pretty normal, and this is how it used to happen. And most of us being Indians here, we understand these things have happened. They still continue to happen in certain parts of the country. But yes, we'll look at it from a modern perspective eventually, of course, of course, we will not, but eventually you will. And you would be able to understand and criticize it from those points of views of which we have the luxury now. But for now, when we are trying to understand the story, we'll just think of it from that perspective. We'll just understand that these things used to happen and it's okay. But how far can we stretch it? That is the question that's going to be asked to us by the story, by the play, as we move ahead in the story. We have seen Aparna being chosen as a husband for Rani by her parents. Why? He fulfilled their criteria. What was Rani's parents' criteria when they started finding a groom for her?
So one was that the groom must be an orphan.
Mm-hmm. And
that he must be able to provide for
not just provide, yeah, he must be rich. And
rich.
Right, and in rural terms, in village terms, in terms of the society that Rani's parents were a part of, Aparna is way richer than they are, at least, and he is rich. There is no doubt that he'll be able to provide for her. He should be able to give her a very comfortable life. Is her life comfortable though, on first impressions? What have we seen Aparna doing with Rani? Is there any love in this marriage so far?
No, sir.
No? Any consideration for another human being that you have brought from a different house to a different village to a different house again, who's cooking food for you on daily basis now? Any consideration at all for his wife?
No, sir.
No. We don't like him as a husband, do we?
Not really, sir. Not really.
You are the one to judge, right? We are the one to judge. Anyway, so of course he's not. There are certain expectations that, and because we are trying to understand it from Rani's perspective to begin with, because she's the victim here, pretty obviously. And as a wife, as someone who has moved in from a very different house, from a different village, from a different household, to this new guy's village, to this new person's household, who is supposed to take care of you. He's supposed to provide you security of all kinds. And then that's the dream, right? That's what she's been told by her parents all this time. They've been raising her for the last 15, 20 years. That eventually you will have to go to your own household and you will be married off to a person and he will hopefully fall in love with you and you two would live happily ever after. But with Rani, all those dreams have been checked all of a sudden. And we have seen that already happening. We see her trapped inside the house all day. The door is locked from the outside. She stays in, she stays locked. He doesn't even talk to her. They have absolutely no relationship of any kind. There is no emotional understanding. There is hardly a conversation between the two. And on top of it, they don't even have a physical relationship yet. It's not even as if he has consummated his marriage. He is just not... See, because we need to understand it from a psychological perspective also. Because we are talking about a woman who is lying in this house. Do you think even if they had consummated their marriage, even if they had any sort of a physical association, do you think Rani would have been less sad?
No, sir, because there's this emotional criteria which is not being fulfilled.
Okay. Anyone else? Of course, the emotional criteria is very important and these two have hardly had a conversation. But I'm just saying, if even if he had consummated his marriage, even if they had shared that physical bond to begin with, at least, would that have made any difference whatsoever to how Rani is feeling right now?
Sir, in my opinion, I think it would have, because according to how this Indian culture mythology works, it's like only once the couple have consummated, they are said to be husband and wife. So she would have felt a more belonging towards her husband, like even though he is not treating her well, she would have felt like she belongs to him, like she belonged to her parents earlier, had they consummated, but they didn't. So she just feels very left out, like she's not being told what to do. She doesn't know who to, like, attach herself to, form of a thing. Very uncertainty that is making her, or giving her all these hallucinations that she's still with her parents and all that. That's my opinion.
Okay. See, you can look at it from both points of views, and normally our perspective is governed by our individual life and our individual thinking also. So that's pretty okay. But I personally feel that on a certain level, Rani feels absolutely unneeded by her husband. He just comes home, eats the food that she makes, that one meal, takes a shower and whatnot, and then he goes back. There is absolutely nothing apart from that. And not even being needed, I think, is the worst thing that can happen to Rani right now in any form. So, anyway, that's a hypothetical scenario because they don't have even that sort of a relationship. So, can we understand that Rani is in a place right now where she doesn't even feel needed at all? And obviously, then we see her drifting into these reveries and drifting into these fantasies where she eventually finds a way to, reach her parents and talk to them, because their love and their security blanket is the only thing that is familiar to her right now. And she wants to go back to that comfort zone, go back to that safety net, if I may. And because it's not happening here. It's not just that we're talking about a very young girl who has come to this foreign village, to this foreign house, who is alone, and the door is locked from the outside. She must be scared also, isn't it?
Right, sir.
Right. And the only relief that she has are those reveries. One of those reveries we did discuss, and now we move ahead. So Aparna has gone again, right? And he's taken his lunch and he's left. Rani tried to strike a conversation with him. She was trying to tell him that I'm scared, indirectly telling him that, I mean, what the hell, right? And please address this issue. Ye aisa kab tak chalega? But obviously she did not have the courage, or she probably respects her husband that way too much, or fears him. For whatever reason, she doesn't push it during that conversation. And we see Aparna doesn't realize anything. He eventually gets up and leaves. Now, we know where he goes, right? Where does Aparna go every day?
To his mistress.
Right. Right when he leaves this afternoon to his mistress's house, there is a surprise visit that Rani eventually goes through. I mean, someone visits her. Now, as much as we know that she's missing her parents, etc., and she's trapped inside the house, we are introduced to two new characters. One is Kuru Davva, and the other is Kapanna. Rani's husband's name is Aparna. This new character is Kapanna. Kapanna and Kurudava are mother and son. Kurudava is the mother. She's an old blind lady. And Kapanna is her son. Now, how do they know Rani or Aparna? Aparna's mother, she died in childbirth. So when Aparna was born, he lost his mother right away. His mother had a very close friend who is this blind old lady now, Kurudava. She and Aparna's mother used to be BFFs once upon a time. And so she's always been worried. She's always had, because she died in childbirth, so obviously because Kurudava and Aparna's mother had a very strong connection. So she has remained a little worried about Aparna all her life. She thinks of him like a son. And but Aparna and Kurudava have never really had any sort of a strong relationship, because Aparna puts no effort into it. Aparna doesn't consider Kurudava important. And I mean, obviously, we are all getting an idea as to what kind of a personality Aparna has. Pretty much everyone hates him, right? Nobody likes him.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all the characters we get to know, nobody likes him. Obviously, उसके कर्म भी नहीं है पसंद आने वाले. He doesn't do anything which people would like. So we see and we are introduced to these characters. So why have they come today? Kapanna, this young man, Kurudava's son, he came to know about obviously Apanna's marriage and told his mother many days ago. Then he came to know that he's still living in that mistress's house on the street, and he has married this woman and he leaves her all day at the house, and he's spending all his nights and pretty much most of his days at that woman's house, जिसके साथ पहले भी, right, whatever. And he goes back home that day and informs his mother, Kurudava. ऐसे ऐसे चल रहा है, Apanna got married to this new woman and he brought her here and he doesn't even stay with his wife. So it became sort of the news outside, and Kurudava got hold of it, and Kurudava told his mother, Kapanna got hold of it and Kapanna told his mother Kurudava. And Kurudava, he regretted it 5 minutes later because his mother could not sleep the entire night, and she was like, I want to go and talk to him and I want to go and see his wife now. And she did not sleep for 1 minute the entire last night, and as soon as the as soon as the day broke out, she just kept on begging her son to take her to Apanna's house. Now Kapanna, because his mother is blind, she is pretty reliant on him taking her to pretty much everywhere, and it's not as if he just holds her hand and walks her to places. Kapanna takes a lot of pride, and he carries his mother on his shoulders everywhere. His blind mother. I'm sure you know the story of Shravan Kumar. You do?
Yes, sir.
Right. So pretty much on the same lines, just minus one parent. So Kurudava and Kapanna have finally arrived, and Kurudava was never in favor of this decision. He doesn't like Apanna, he is intimidated by Apanna, he knows he's not a good human being. So Kapanna, as much as possible, tries to stay out of his way. And when they arrive at Apanna's house, Kurudava tells his mother, Mama, the door is locked from the outside, so let's go, we'll come back some other time. But Kurudava insists, no, you just put me down here and you go and just jhanko inside the house and see if there's anybody inside. Now normally you would never do that. In British literature, these things do not happen until and unless you're reading a detective novel, right? This is stalking to extreme levels, because it's not even as if it's some old lost lover of Rani who has come and started. So it's not even in a direct romantic sense. These are just people who know Apanna distantly, and they're actually looking inside the house. What is this? If a house is locked from outside, what does that tell you as a visitor? You go to somebody's house and the house is locked. What does that tell you?
So that no one is there in the house.
Right. So you're supposed to go back, maybe come some other time, or are you supposed to jump the gate and then start looking from the windows, etc., etc.?
So we're supposed to leave and approach
Right.
another time.
But we can understand why Kurudava and Kapanna, especially Kurudava, not Kapanna because he was against this idea. But can we understand why Kurudava would think of it as normal in the Indian context? That distant relatives or distant people are still so preoccupied with someone else's life. We can understand this. This is an Indian concept, isn't it? These things will probably not happen in the West. But in the Indian context, it's not too far-fetched, is it? Oh, come on, say yes. Say something.
Yes, sir.
Right. So, anyway, Apanna decides to, he says, Mom, let's not do it. Come on, let's just leave. The house is locked, right? But the mother insists, and Kapanna puts her down, and eventually goes and, starts to just look around with half heart. And eventually he's absolutely startled. He initially thought it's a witch or something, and he ran away from there, and he was like, Mom, there is a woman in the house. And Kurudava realizes in one instant what is happening. And Rani, meanwhile, because she is going through those reveries and fantasies inside the house, Rani, meanwhile, because of the commotion outside, which she somehow notices, she comes out and she sees Kurudava, and she's like, what are you doing? Who are you? And then they strike a conversation. And Kurudava introduces herself to Rani from the other side of the barred window, and she tells her who she is, how she knows Aparna. And Rani, who's already missing her parents so much because she's missing that safety net, because she is a victim in this situation, and she doesn't know what to do, and she doesn't feel needed, and she doesn't feel like a wife at all. And obviously, because there is no marriage life. So while she's looking for a parent figure anyway, Kurudava arrives at pretty much the same time. And Rani could not hold herself back once she realizes that this is more or less like family. And she shares her complete plight with Kurudava. And Kurudava is obviously startled. She is amazed. She wants to talk to her. She wants to help her. And she's the one who actually informs Rani for the first time that I know why this is happening. It's because there is a woman, there is a bazaar woman. That is the phrase that she uses. And I'll read that line for you if I can just find it. Right, anyway, so they have a conversation, and Rani tells her that he only comes back in the morning and all he needs is his lunch, and all the conversation we have is just do this, do that, and then he leaves and he locks me inside like a prisoner. Anyone who is locked from outside is a prisoner, right? And obviously she is a prisoner and she feels like a prisoner. She's not even allowed to go and walk around. And he has just brought her here, and he has trapped her inside this house. So Rani lets go and she shares with Kurudava, and she shares everything that's been happening to her. And then Kurudava calls her son when she's going through this entire discussion. She calls her son Kapanna, and she tells him with very, very precise instructions that you go to the house, and there's in the storage there's this box. Inside that box there's this white cloth. Inside that white cloth there are these roots, 2 pieces of root. You go and bring that. And Kapanna is reluctant. He's like, we need to leave. If Aparna comes, he would not be happy, and let's go. But the mother insists that no, you run back home and you bring those 2 pieces of root, and meanwhile I'll continue my conversation with Rani. And then she's like, let me touch you, let me see you. I mean, right, you know how blind people in those cases behave. They would use the touch sense to kind of assess the person, right? Sometimes they do that. So, and she touches him and she puts her hands on her face, and she says, Ayo, how beautiful you are. Ears like hibiscus, skin like young mango leaves, lips like rolls of silk. How can that Aparna gallivant around, leaving such loveliness wasting away at home? So, Rani continues this conversation, and eventually Kurudava starts talking about those roots that she has asked her son to bring. See, she wants to help, but now the kind of help that she comes up with, obviously it has its roots in mythology, and I hope it'll be something that you would be able to still believe can happen in an Indian context. She tells her, and I'm just reading out from the text, I was born blind. This is Kurudava talking to Rani, and she says, I was born blind. No one would marry me. My father wore himself out, going from village to village looking for a husband, but to no avail. One day, A mendicant came to our house. No one was at home. I was alone. I looked after him in every way. I cooked hot food specially for him and served him to his heart's content. He was pleased with me and he gave me 3 pieces of fruit. And he said, quote unquote, any man who eats any of these pieces will marry you. Feed him the smallest piece first. If that gives no results, then try the middle sized one. Only if both fail, feed him the largest piece. Now Rani is obviously suddenly charmed. I hope you understood. So the mendicant gave these pieces of roots to Kurudava as a gift, right? She took such good care of him, and again, that's an Indian context. It's understandable in the Indian context because we have seen beggars and different kinds of people in different mythological stories who just randomly come to people's house and then Atithi Devo Bhava, and you're supposed to take care of that person, provide him food, comfort, etc. etc. And eventually, when they leave, they used to have these powers which they would use to give people gifts. I hope you've read stories like that growing up.
Yes, sir.
Right. So, again, in the Indian context. And Kurudava then says that I was in such a hurry. Eventually, there was this boy a distantly related boy who came to their village once upon a time. And she said, I was in such a rush, I completely forgot about the smallest root piece. And I gave him the middle-sized one. She used the middle-sized root on that boy. He finished his meal, and again I'm reading from the text. He finished his meal, gave me one look, and instantly fell in love. He married me within the next 2 days. Never went back to his village. It took the plague to detach him from me. So, it's been done before. It's not as if she's giving her something which has never been tried and tested. She has tried it. It worked for Kurudava once upon a time. And ever since, she has kept these 2 other pieces of fruit with him. And she had a wonderful married life. He was in love with her for the entirety of his life. And obviously we know now he's dead. Rani starts laughing listening to this story. And meanwhile, Kapanna returns with the roots and Kurudava gives her the 2 pieces of roots. And she says, you can try the smaller one first. Here, take this smaller piece. That should do for a pretty jasmine like you. Take it, grind it into a very nice paste and feed it to your husband and watch the results. Once he smells you, he won't go sniffing after that bitch. He'll make you a wife instantly. That is what Kurudava says while she's handing over the roots to Rani. Can we imagine Rani's state of mind right now? For 1 second, while she's gotten all this new information, while she's gotten these 2 pieces of fruits, what is Rani thinking right now? Any idea?
Sir, to be very honest, I think Rani is probably freaked out because she never knew this woman existed, and then she comes and tells her all this. Plus, she doesn't even know her husband well. So when they say that, people who say that they know her husband are coming and talking to her, I think she would be skeptical.
Fair enough. Okay, that's one perspective. Anyone else? Oh, come on. Kurudava has just given her this gift. She's had this first conversation here with anyone outside of Apanna. How is Rani feeling right now? Is there any chance she's happy? Is there any chance her spirits are lifted? Come on. No?
Don't exactly think so, sir.
Sorry?
No, sir.
No, sir, not really.
No.
I think probably she also takes this woman to be a sort of a source of information now.
Okay.
this one person she can at least, sort of rely on for some sort of information.
Fair enough. Do the root pieces not have any sort of influence on Rani's mind? I mean, it's that kind of a root and that kind of a magic by that root would be in demand today also, if it existed. So, does that not have any effect on Rani? Or is she disbelieving? Is that what you're saying? Oh, come on. She's come into this house. She's been here. She's been living here like a prisoner. She's had no hope at all of things getting better. Nothing. And now, for the first time, she probably has something in her hand. Yeah, it might be just a magic root from an old blind woman, but it is something. Anyway, uh, meanwhile, Kapanna starts whistling from the other end of the yard because he told her mother that you take your time, but if I see Apanna coming, I'll whistle. And that's the signal. And Kapanna starts whistling. So obviously, Apanna's arrival is imminent. Rani invites Kurudava to visit her again before she leaves, and Kurudava promises that I will at some point come back. As she is leaving, she kind of realizes, Kurudava, that Apanna has come already, and he has seen her, and he had seen her. Now, Kurudava, you know how she feels about Apanna. How does Kurudava feel about Apanna? She thinks of him as a son, doesn't she? I mean, a bad son, but a son nevertheless.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
sir.
we also know that Apanna has never really had any contribution, or he has never really made any contribution to that relationship. He doesn't want to be in touch with Kurudava. So, as Apanna has come and she realizes it, she just tells him that you got married, you brought a new wife, and I wanted to see her and I wanted to talk to her. And Apanna says there's absolutely no need. Please do not come back. Right? घर पे ताला लगा दिया और मैं क्या करूं? People can't even stay outside when I've locked the door from the outside. What's wrong? So he makes those sorts of comments, and then as he's going inside the house, he shouts and he's making sure that Kurudava listens to this, and he's like, I'll get a watchdog tomorrow. जिन लोगों को ताला दिखाई नहीं देता उनका क्या करें? What do you do for blind people? They can't see a lock. So he says those nasty things. Kurudava hears those nasty things and she leaves. This particular episode also tells us a lot more about Apanna. It's not just that he is disrespectful or irresponsible when it comes to his marriage. He is also a mean human being, if nothing else. Can we agree on that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, the effect of this paste on Apanna, because that is the next step anyway. That's the next logical step in the story. How quickly does Rani find out? And does that root really have some power? Or was it just blind luck with Kurudava, the old lady? So, obviously these questions come to our mind. And now that Apanna is here, Rani is obviously supposed to, he comes in, he asks for a warm glass of milk, and that is Rani's first opportunity. She starts the kitchen as Apanna goes to the washroom and, takes care of his daily motions. Rani boils the milk for her husband, and as she puts it in a glass, she notices the roots again. And she's unable to decide, she's very confused, and she looks at the roots, and then she picks up the smaller one and she grinds it into a paste. She very hurriedly mixes the milk and the paste and then just gives it to Apanna. Apanna meanwhile has gotten ready. Apanna was supposed to leave. Apanna he doesn't drink it. He gulps the milk, and now Rani is just waiting for the magic to happen, and she's right there. And Apanna very strangely he is in a dizzy sort of a state after drinking that glass of milk, and he starts going out from the house, and he just falls right there, half inside the house, half outside the house. Rani tries to drag him inside, and Rani is really worried now. Because a big part of Rani thinks that she's just murdered her husband, isn't it? Yeah?
Yes.
It is going through her head, and it's, I mean, aaj ka time to tha nahi. You can't just, I mean, it was a very different time. So Rani is very worried about her husband's health right away. Eventually, though, he regains consciousness, gets up, asks for water very indistinctively, and Rani, gives him water. He gulps that glass of water now and gets up and leaves and locks Rani from the outside. So, but I mean, Rani obviously obviously the magic root or that paste of that root hasn't worked, and at least the smaller piece hasn't worked. And Rani is again, she's just stunned with this whole episode, and she just goes back to her own room and starts fantasizing again. She goes back to another one of those reveries. This time she's thinking about a demon, though. A demon who has locked up a beautiful girl in a castle, a beautiful damsel rather. And it rains for 7 days and 7 nights, and the sea floods the city. The waters break down the door of the castle, and a big whale comes to rescue her. Come, Rani, let's go. So, her dreams we have seen, her reveries, her fantasies, they have been her only escape for a while. Yes, she had reason to be excited today with Kurudava coming and giving her that magic root, etc., etc. And yes, today has been a more eventful day. And by virtue of that root not working or whatever happened with Aparna during the aftermath of drinking that glass of milk, she's also been able to make sure that he's staying at home for a longer time than any other day so far in their marriage. Not the way she intended it, but anyway, it did happen. So, and now she's again lost all hope because one, she was very scared for a while, and two, it didn't work. Rani falls asleep as it is almost midnight now, and in the middle of the night, Kapanna enters with Kurudava. Right, so Kurudava is back the same night. Since it is dark, Kapanna stumbles upon something and he falls, and because his mother was always on his shoulders, she also, falls. And I mean, why do you think Kurudava has come back? Why do you think she's here? She just met him in the morning. Why is Kurudava back? Right, of course, that is the obvious question, isn't it? Thanks, Karthikeya. That is the obvious question. She wants to know because she knew that she must have used it right away. And Rani tells her what happened, and Rani says, I was very scared. I thought he died, and etc. etc. Kurudava listens to the whole story, and then she finally reaches to a conclusion, and she says, it is no meager infatuation that he has for that bazaar woman. She has cast a magic spell on him. You have to give him the bigger root. That is the solution she comes up with. That's bad, quote unquote. That's bad. This is no ordinary infatuation then. There is a woman, a bazaar woman. She has your husband in her clutches. Maybe she's cast a spell. There's only one solution to this. Feed him the larger piece of fruit. Now, Rani is a little apprehensive, right? Most importantly, because there was that 1 second where she thought she probably killed her husband. And she's already seen what effect the smaller root had on Aparna. He was unconscious and this and that. So she's very apprehensive, and she doesn't know if he would be able to survive the bigger root, considering what happened in the aftermath of him drinking milk from the smaller root. So she has questions, but Kurudava assures her in a way that don't worry, nothing would happen. You prepare a curry and you grind that paste and you mix it into a curry, and then he let him just have 1 teaspoonful, and he'll be yours forever. Now that dream, that possibility is too tempting for Rani, and obviously she eventually decides to go ahead with it. Kurudava, before she leaves, also tells her, remember, just do not let anything frighten you. Right? Don't let anything frighten you. Next morning, Apanna returns home, and true to his word, by the way, he returns home with a very vicious looking dog. Um, and because he wanted a watchdog now because of the sudden appearance of Kurudava yesterday, he obviously doesn't know that she came in the night also. And this very vicious looking dog is just tied in chains outside the house on the tree. And the dog starts barking right away. As the dog begins to bark, Rani looks out of the window and Apanna grumbles. The blind woman and her son, let them step here again and they'll know. And again he asks Rani to, serve him food after he has taken a bath, etc., etc. Rani takes down her pot of curry, she grinds that entire paste, mixes it in the curry, and the curry suddenly turns blood red. And now she's just lost her in her head. She doesn't know what to do because it pretty much looks like blood. And Rani feels that maybe when Kurudava gave that food to her eventual husband, because Kurudava probably could not see the color of the curry herself because she was blind, maybe she didn't see it. But how can I give this to Apanna, and what if something happens to him? Because it was blood red. It was very, very visible. And she starts having cold feet, and she starts having these second thoughts into her head. And she just picks up that entire pot of the curry and decides to throw it out. She walks outside the house. You remember in their yard there's this huge ant hill. We talked about it in the beginning.
Yes, sir.
Right. And she decides to go out and throw it there. And there's this very small monologue sort of, where she says, oh my god, what horrible mess this is. Blood, perhaps poison. Shall I serve him this? That woman is blind, but he isn't. How could he possibly not see this boiling blood? But this poisonous red? And then, even if he doesn't see it, how do I know it is not dangerous? Suppose something happens to my husband. What will my fate be? That little piece made him feel ill. Who knows? And eventually she decides that this is the best course of action, and she gets to the front door, she gets outside the house, and she throws it over the anthill. The entire pot of curry. She turns around, and obviously the dog is still barking, was tied to the tree right outside the house. As she turns around and starts going back, a king cobra comes out of that anthill. A king cobra who has tasted that curry climbs out of that anthill, and he's completely in love with Rani now. And he starts hissing and he wants to get closer to the house, but the dog is barking in the corner, and he goes behind a tree. He finds a certain place in the yard behind certain plants, and he cannot stop looking at Rani. Rani has gotten inside the house now, and it's pretty obvious the snake is completely head over heels in love with this human now. Rani goes inside the house. Because the dog can see the cobra, he has barked furiously all afternoon. He is still barking in the evening. He's still barking as it starts to get dark. When it becomes dark, the king cobra is still seen watching Rani from a distance, from behind the tree, and the dog is still continuously barking. When it is totally dark, the king cobra decides to move towards the house. Right? He decides to move towards the house and eventually finds a way. He gets into the drain and I'm so sorry. Before that happens, Rani wakes up because of the continuous barking of this dog, and while she is woken up because of the dog, this snake has found a way, the king cobra has found a way to get inside the house through the drainage system. As you know, a cobra can assume any form it likes. That is how it is explained in the text. Right? Guys, we can understand this concept of King Cobra changing shapes and forms?
Right, sir.
Right, we all can in the Indian context. इसके ऊपर तो movies भी हैं बहुत सारी.
हाँ, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir, Nagin.
Right, Sri Devi, I think. I don't know. I think she was the best at it when we used to watch TV in the 90s. Those movies were. Anyway, trip back nostalgia lane later. So, being from the Indian background, most of us, we can understand these stories. We can understand a snake changing forms, a king cobra who deserves to change forms anyway. So a king cobra is capable of changing forms. They're capable of taking human forms. Again, this is also coming from the mythology. And that night it entered the house through the bathroom drain and took the shape of people who have read the story. Whose shape does the king cobra take?
Sir, Apanna.
Apanna.
Sir, Apanna.
Right. So the king cobra decides to take the form of Apanna, the human, Apanna, Rani's husband, and he gets inside the house and he spends all night watching Rani sleep. He finds her sleeping in the bedroom and he just watches her all night. And that is where we come to the end of Act 1. And it's obviously left at a very strange sort of a place, isn't it? The end of Act 1.
Yes, sir.
So far we did not have Rani did not have any sort of a comfort in her life. Already she already has a tough life. And now there's a king cobra who has fallen in love with her. And a king cobra who can take and assume any form, any shape of any human being. And here he is. And we don't know obviously what's going to happen. If you've not read it, you don't know. But there are already a lot of questions here. What happens to Apanna now? What happens to Rani? What happens to Rani? Are we looking at an extramarital affair? And there are a lot of other questions. Plus, it's a snake at the end of the day. How will that relationship work? Anyway, there are a lot of questions going forward. We'll start with Act 2 Okay guys, so we will not start with Act 2 together because I think it's Wednesday today, so yeah, this is our last class officially. 16th is my last day, so I think we'll be starting Act 2 with someone else. And please tell me, abhi tak samajh mein aa raha hai?
Yes, sir. Sir, also we have a request.
Yeah, Shuman.
Sir, the students of this class, we actually wanted to let you know how much fun it was studying with you. So we wanted a chance to speak a few words for you, if that's okay.
Do we have enough time? It's absolutely okay. You want to do it now? You want to do it later?
Okay. Sir, now it's fine, sir.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, sir, we'll start.